Hey, juniors. I want to take a minute out of your time to talk about the fair that's coming up next week. There's 2 days of fair on the evenings of September 29th and the 30th from 6 to 9. One day is for the first day is American universities. The next day is the universities from the rest of the world. So I want to help you to take advantage of this. So I sent out links earlier in the week. You can click on those and register, and I really encourage you to do that so that you can see what universities are taking part and that you can do some research before you get going on it. And once you get in, you'll be able to see presentations that the universities are offering, and you can go into and see the presentations and then click on the heart on the right-hand side, and then the system will keep track of the ones you put the hearts on. And then you can see all the ones that you want to do and see if you can get the timing right on them. And then you show up at the time indicated and listen to them. But you'll also be able to drop in and talk with representatives as well. So when they're not presenting, they're just in a Zoom call waiting for students to come and talk with them. So when you do go to a Zoom call, you want to make sure that you do a couple of things. You want to keep your video on. I really encourage you to keep your video on, show your face. It's so much better for the person there, even during the presentations. During the presentations, to keep your video on. During one-on-one, during the drop-ins, you may be one-on-one or you may be with a group, but keep your video on. It really makes a big impression. Sitting at a desk with your head like this, like you're doing school. And ideally have your computer at face level rather than sort of just showing your forehead or looking down. Okay. Smile, have a smile on your face, tell them your name, what school you're from. So you may do that when you enter into a presentation. The presenter might, kind of be asking you questions or talking to you. Definitely when you go into a drop-in Zoom meeting, you want to introduce yourself, what school you're from. Feel free to ask questions, or you can actually say you're not sure what to ask going into those rooms. Especially if you drop into a school that you're not familiar with, you need to be polite. So don't just show up and while the person's talking, leave. Don't put inappropriate things in the chat. When the presentation's done or when you're done talking with a rep, make sure you say thank you. This is the time to make an impression. You may or may not be applying to some of these schools that you're talking with in the end, but in case that you do, you want to make a good impression. And you want them to remember you again in case you apply to the school. If you can come up with a few thoughtful questions, so things that are important to you that you want to find out from each school. If you could do a little research on the school ahead of time, that's ideal. If you can't, I would come up with about 4 or 5 questions that you kind of want to know from all universities. You will be remembered if you're put together and show serious interest in the school. Browse the booth, keep track of the schools that you've gone to. If you go to a presentation, and usually after the presentations they just have a drop-in, so you could hang out until most people leave, and then you can have a chat to have a more in-depth conversation if you feel like, oh, I want to learn more about this school. And don't be shy. Be open to exploring options with them. They may want to have a dialogue with you during the open times, the drop-in times, and they may ask you questions, and you want to give them honest answers, and then they may give you advice, or they may talk about some other options that you can think about in terms of looking at universities in general. They're here to promote their university, but they also just want to help guide you to the right university. What you want to try to avoid is asking very general questions. So those are questions that you could find on their website, like deadlines, general information on their website. Their admission requirements that you can find on the website. So what do you need to turn in for admissions? That's a pretty common question. I hear a lot of these, and it's just not a good use of the time. You'll be able to find that out as you do more research. Other pet peeves that people ask about, what's your best major? What's your most popular major? What are your strengths? School's going to say we're strong in everything. Um, or a question that sort of maybe doesn't have to do with college admissions. Um, so keep that in mind. Some other questions that you might ask. You want to ask questions based on what's important to you in a university. So, but there's some general questions like, what's the experience outside the classroom? What do they have available on campus? What are some exciting student groups? What's it like to live where that is? What are the accommodations like? Um, how do I apply and when? You could ask what application systems they use. Um, what's it like in the day of student? How is your university unique from others? You could ask stuff like, what are you looking for IB scores? Because since you're IB, um, other questions like that. Don't try to come up with a unique question. Most of them have heard it all before. So that's why I go back to, what's important to you in a university? What are you looking for? Questions about specific majors would be good. Um, Questions about, what do they look for in an essay? If you have to write an essay for them, how do they read them? What are they looking for? Stuff like that. Say thank you. What's the best way to keep in touch? A lot of times they'll share their email with you when you go into a drop-in. They'll ask you they usually will ask you to give them some information. This is the time to kind of demonstrate your interest in the school. And it's also a time that if you come to this school, during this time, and then they come back next year, and then you see them again, and then you end up applying. A lot of them actually keep a record of, did you come in dialogue with them? Did you email them after the fair? And so that's called demonstrated interest, and you could up your chances of getting into that school if they see that you've shown interest in the school. If you are in a drop-in time and there's other people around in there, just ask a couple of questions and then let other students ask their questions, and hang around, because other students may have questions that you didn't think of, that you can get some more information. But if you are in there one-on-one, you've got a couple of questions and that's all, don't be afraid to say, okay, I want to go visit with more schools, and then say thank you and goodbye. After you leave the booth or after a presentation, actually what I would recommend is that you pop open a document to keep notes on. So I would put the university name, and you can take notes during the presentations, or even while you're talking to them. If they say something, you want to jot it down. And then you definitely want to take the admission rep name and their phone number, email. And jot down things. What are your most important things you want to remember about the school? What's your impression? Is this a school that you might want to apply to? And you can also, if you come away from this and you have some schools that you think, oh, this might be a good school, it's a good fit for me, or that I want to apply to, you can actually put it into Maya Learning. So under the university section, there's potential universities that you might think about. You can put as many in there as you want. It's a good way to keep track of universities you might consider applying to. And then if you end up applying to them, you just switch it from the considering universities to actually applying universities. Okay. And if you have time, it's okay to go to a school that you're not familiar with. In fact, some of our students who've done that have ended up finding out about a school that wasn't even in their radar. And so, and even if you're not interested in a school, maybe you get some additional information about the school, and maybe that sparks an interest or another question you could ask. And then be prepared to talk about yourself, because they will, especially if there's in a small group, they might ask you what your interests are. I'm going to be available. I'm going to be around. You can hang out to me during that time. You can ask me questions before or after. The counselors are really, your counselor is really there to really help you out with that. And if I can't find an answer, I'll let you know and I'll go find it. I might even pop into some of the rooms myself and ask them questions. Okay. I definitely attend a few presentations, especially if you're going into this and you have no idea, you haven't done any research, you don't have any idea about the schools. Maybe you want to spend the bulk of your time this year in the presentations. There's going to be a lot of interesting ones. How do you establish a good fit school? There's an engineering one. There's medical ones. There's a whole range of things from the UK, the essay to the essay that you have to write for the United States. So there's just a huge range of presentations that are going to be done there. So, maybe you don't want to talk one-on-one. Maybe you just do want to do presentations, and then maybe your senior year during the college fair, you want to focus on the drop-ins and maybe not as many of the presentations. But I think you should do a little bit of both presentations and drop-ins. And if you're not sure what to ask, if you show up to a room and you're not sure what to ask, I think saying that and then they'll dialogue with you. And then, when the 12th graders are there asking specific questions, it's good to listen and hear. And remember, this is your year to do a lot of research. By August of your senior year, you want to have a list. And so this is really your year to really find out information and gather it. Now, after the fair, it's really good to email the rep. You should have their name and email and thank them for their time. That's another way to give a good impression. Look through your notes. If you haven't opened a folder that has university stuff in it, open that, put the document in that. Keep track of it. You want to review it. Write down any questions that you might have, like from the fair that you didn't get answered. And you can follow up with me to try to get the answers, or even email further questions to the reps. And really, if you start thinking there might be 4 or 5 that come out of this that stick in your head, just keep track of that. Put it in Maya Learning. That's pretty much it. If you can basically show up and be engaged and be ready to ask questions, be ready to listen and go to some of the presentations, that's really good. And just treat it as a very formal affair. Most of these people that are showing up are the ones who are actually going to read your application if you apply there. And so just keep that in mind. Be very formal, very kind, and make a good impression. And really, I can tell you that if you keep your video on, that's like 50% of it. You will see that a lot of students won't keep the video on. So you keeping your video on, you will be remembered for that.